Welcome, everybody, to another special edition of the Gulf Coast Growth Show. My name is Chad Burke. I'm with the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region. And today I'm here with a couple of really special guests. I've got Adam Winkler with Winkler Public Relations with us here. Old pro, TV vet, moderator of the Gulf Coast Industry Forum. We'll talk about him a lot later. But and new good friend, Evan Mintz with the Houston Chronicle. Evan's been doing some good work, kind of spreading the word about what we do in this region. Before I turn it over to Adam to moderate what's going to be, I think, one of the best conversations we've had. We spend our time, our mission here is to grow this region. It's the largest petrochemical complex in the world. It's the busiest port in the country. It is the manufacturing base for the products that go into everything that we touch every day, from our phones to our clothes, to our cars, to our sports equipment, to food preservation, medical. Everything that we touch on a daily basis comes from the industry that we support here. And we at the Economic Alliance and our members spend a lot of time telling that story. Even here, unfortunately, even in the greater Houston area, we have to continually tell that story that, hey, what we're doing out here, it may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but guess what? It makes life livable for everybody, and not just in America, but around the world. So it's a great industry. It's a great industry to support. We do catch some black eyes every now and then, but it's a great industry to support. It's always evolving. I'd say it's the first high-tech industry in America. And it continues to pushing the envelope as far as what we can and can do, even things like advanced recycling that we're doing right now, and taking plastics down to their molecular level and building them back up and reusing them rather than disposing of them in our landfills. So lots of great things. So with that, I am going to step out of this conversation now that I've introduced the pros and the special guests. But with that, Adam, I'll let you take over.
Chad, thank you very much. I pride myself on being a storyteller, so it's truly a pleasure to sit across the table from one of my favorite storytellers who gets to tell stories in a variety of ways for the Houston Chronicle. He is Evan Mintz, opinion and community engagement editor for the Chronicle. And Evan, obviously, we want to spend a lot of this time talking about the wonderful way you are amplifying the good news of what's happening over here in East Harris County. But I also want to give you a chance to let folks who, God forbid, might not be familiar with you and your work, explain your connection to Houston. One of your favorite catchphrases, if you will, is good news for Houston. And in order to tell the fine folks of the Bayou City what's good news and what's bad news, you have to know about our city. So as best you can, catch us up on your background here in Houston. I know it's you obviously have a journalism background. You know, you have a law degree, and you've been here for a while. So so give the folks an opportunity to find out just how connected to H-Town you are.
Well, I've got family that goes back generations, the beginning of the 20th century. But I joke I took the George Bush route here. My parents were here early 80s. My mom's a lifelong Houstonian going back. My dad moved here to work in the industry as a lawyer from New York. Oil bust happens. My dad's looking for a better job. He finds one in Connecticut. They move up there. They have me. My mom goes, I hate Connecticut. Let's move back to Houston. I moved back here at 18 months old. And the rest is history. I went to school here. I went to Rice undergrad. I left for a little bit to go to law school. And a lot of folks told me, you really need to go to New York City. You like writing. You're into policy. Like, that's the place to go. And it became very clear to me very quickly that I needed to be back in Houston, because Houston is a city that is hot. It is a city of people. It's a city flush with opportunity. And a lot of other places, when you live there, people want to know, well, where'd you come from? And where do you fit in? And do you really deserve to be here? In Houston, people are like, we want you here. And it's a city that doesn't talk about itself enough. And so if I wanted to write about our city and the people who live here and what's important, there was me and about like one other person who wanted to do that job. And I think that particularly right now, this is a city that could stand to talk about itself a little bit more, so that we understand what we do well, where we can improve, and start to push back, I think, at some of the national narratives that suffocate that local perspective.
Well, we're happy we have you here, and I feel like we need those bumper stickers. Like, I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could. Like exactly. That. Like you're the walking, talking, writing example of that. Like Chad teed up for us, with your platform, with your title as opinion and community engagement editor for the Houston Chronicle, you used what I believe was your last op-ed before the World Cup came to our city to talk about what tourists, I mean, we're talking international visitors, what they needed to do with their time as they come in and catch one of the 7 matches here. You didn't really talk about going to NASA. You didn't really talk about the Galleria. You linked to some of the awesome Chronicle food writers. But Evan, I want to know the impetus of the inspiration, if you will, why you chose to highlight the petrochemical industry for these international tourists, why that mattered so much to you.
Well, I think a lot about why we're all here in Houston. It's not the weather. It's not the mosquitoes. It's because this was a good port and because we were close to oil and gas that this took off. It's where the industry developed. And if you want to understand the city, you have to understand that. But just because of the way that the city has grown and the sprawl that's happened further and further west, people don't see this. They don't understand it. So when folks come to our city, I often get asked, like, what should I do in Houston? People want to know restaurant recommendations. And I'll point them to the Chronicle because I've got 2 little kids at home. So unless a restaurant is serving chicken fingers, like I'm usually not getting there.
We're skipping that one.
Yeah. And so I told folks, go drive down 225. Go around sunset when, it's really golden hour and you see the flares coming off these buildings. You can see these big refineries and storage facilities and tanks and everything. And then once you're done, go down to the Kima Boardwalk and play one of those games and buy one of those little stuffed animals. You pop a balloon and then you get a stuffed Pikachu, and just think about how all the materials that are in this little thing that you got came from halfway around the world on tankers and trucks, and how all that is possible because of all the things you just saw as you drove there. And there's nowhere else in the world they can get up close to such a critical concentration of energy, chemical, and oil and gas infrastructure as you can right here in Houston. And I think it is awe-inspiring. I think that it is in many ways almost overwhelming to think about how important all of this is to the modern world. And it's not to downplay pollution concerns, which, whenever I bring this up, that's the first thing that people tell me. But it's like saying, if I wanted to ask how well are the Texans going to do this year, and people start bringing up, well, do you worry about concussions? Like, we can talk about that later. That's not what that's not what this conversation's about. And I just want people to have a lot of respect for how critical all of this is to the rest of the world. And it's right here in Houston.
One of my favorite lines that you had in the op-ed was, quote, everything in your life is possible because of what is happening here, close quote. And that's not overstated. That's the wild part about all this is, whether those tourists or visitors are drinking out of a glass or a cup or whatever mode of transportation, it really does start here. And I also want to give you some love. In addition to the op-ed, you also posted a video. Yes. Multimedia journalist, content creator. Evan, that video has 45,000 views of people consuming it. I'm sure they probably watched it a couple times to see if they were missing a punchline or something. But you talked about it a moment ago about maybe people's comments towards it. Without trying to get into the depths of your inbox, what was some of the response to it? Because as you said, this isn't a story that gets told as much as it should. No, and I say that sometimes the greatest bias in media isn't left or right, it's negativity. We report on planes when they crash, not when they land safely time after time after time. So you usually don't get too much writing about what's going on at the port, at these facilities, unless something bad has happened. And the real life is that every day these facilities are working safely, run by people who care very deeply about them and about their communities. And I want folks to see that. Now, I got a lot of feedback from folks who'd say, well, that there's a lot of pollution over there. It's like, a lot less than there used to be. And people would say, oh, you're just being too critical. They presumed that I was kind of mocking this. I'm like, I'm not. I'm being deeply earnest. And maybe we just live in a very cynical time when everyone presumes that, like, if you're saying something, you must be sarcastic. And I wasn't. One of the more insightful things that people did say, though, is I'm not sure I'd recommend people who aren't used to driving on Houston freeways go down there next to all the 18-wheelers. Like, that's kind of an expert skill. Like, okay, I'll take that. Yes, don't do that on your first trip. Exactly. I planned on recording it on my phone, on a little phone holder on my dashboard, and it broke that morning.
So I was driving there, one hand on the steering wheel, one hand holding the phone up to the window. And I was like, don't tell my wife.
No, we'll just presume that you had a massive video crew that was with you. This was a whole production. But, I'm glad that your phone holder didn't break on 225. But if it did, and one of the messages we like to tell the industry, the traffic that makes the world go is what has turned, 225 into what it is. You talk about the 18-wheelers, like it really is. It's the commerce that goes into the ships that come and go, like you talked about.
I love that this is called the Gulf Coast Growth Show, because Houston really is a city of growth, but sort of physically of its people, but also its mindsets. And one of the things I can say that will piss off everyone is I want more people to move to Houston. I think it's good for the city. It's a city of opportunity, so it's good when people, for them to move here. And instantly I'll get pushback where folks say, no, the traffic's already too bad. Like, we don't need that. And I'd say that the only thing worse than living in a city with too much traffic is a city with not enough traffic. Go to Detroit, go to St. Louis, go to Cleveland, and see what those freeways are like.
Amen to that. Anybody who wants to move here, we will take you, and we will more than likely find a job for you, and more than likely that's in industry. And Evan, in the op-ed, you talked about kind of the gee whiz moment for a youngster when they're at the Museum of Natural Science and inside Weiss Energy Hall, and they can take a look at all of the things that make STEM so popular, that make chemistry so popular at that age. It's it's awe-inspiring. But 5, 10, 15 years later, when that 8-year-old or 10-year-old grows into a college student or a young adult, they're not telling that positive story about chemistry anymore, and realizing that you're a lot of things, but you're probably not a psychologist. What do you think goes into that? Why do you think there's that gap between we all need STEM and we see how much chemistry matters when you're maybe in elementary school, but not enough people who are of driving age can drive down 225 and appreciate it the way that you do?
I think a lot of people kind of lose that sense of wonder as they get older, and sometimes it gets looked down upon to be so wide-eyed about the world. We have an op-ed right now they're moving through from someone kind of lamenting that Houston no longer has the tallest building in Texas. That's now to Austin. And it's all just about how, I like tall buildings. Like, what's the economic reason? What's the culture reason? Put that aside. Like, I want to have really cool tall things. And I kind of think the same way about this. How do you expose people to, I guess, the fascination of chemistry happening at these facilities? I almost wonder what it would take. I don't know if you've watched like Planet Earth or Life or these nature documentaries. It'd be really neat to have documentaries about these facilities and really understand down to that chemical level about what's happening in them and how it happens, to try to bring that experience you'd have at the Weiss Energy Hall maybe onto Nova, maybe onto National Geographic, to Netflix, and really like get a sense of what all of this is. And I worry that we live in a real negative age. It goes with that media bias, but historically you've always had those editors there who can keep that positive view on the world, particularly where they live. But so much news now is pushed out by algorithm that's automatic, and we just follow that algorithm. No wonder people who spend so much time online are mad all the time or depressed all the time. And so how can you talk about the industry and talk about the fascinating and positive aspects of it and not get all tied up in the very real challenges? And I'd say, well, that's on us. That's on people to tell those positive stories, not in a way that obscures the full picture, but in a way that is very straightforward and about, in many ways, the science of what's happening there, the importance on the global scale and the global economy, and also the people who work there who take their jobs very seriously.
I do want to drill down on the getting the story out there and media coverage, but something that you said. I mean, we're talking about access to the people, the people who make it. Like, is it too sophomore to say like maybe we need field trips to a plant? Like, I mean, this is something like to almost like have that. Wow, it's I can touch it, I can feel it. Like the seatbelts that we rode on, we used to come here. This is where it's made. Like, do you think that maybe that could be something where we start to almost expose it? Like, hey, it's not all negative. Like, here's your neighbor working inside of this plant.
You know, there's this social media meme, and I forget exactly what it says, but basically that field trips are wasted on kids. As an adult, I would love nothing more than learning how like crayons are made in a factory or going down to like the local water plants. And it would be interesting if you could get adults to say, like, I would love to go on a tour of these facilities. And, you know, you can go on a boat tour of the Port of Houston. Yep. That's pretty cool. I've done boat tours down Buffalo Bayou and I once had the opportunity to go on a tour of a natural gas plant. It was me and a bunch of teachers. And I said, like, this is really cool. What's the next plant you can get me into?
Yes. And that is, as you know, somebody who's as well educated as you are, if you have that representation and you have that, you know, where you're utilizing all of your senses, it just changes your perspective so much. And, you know, for the people who aren't among the 45,000 who watched your video or clicked on the article, like, they obviously need some perspective. They need, you know, they need a reminder of all of the, you know, the magic that happens here in East Harris County. And we talked a little bit about it, Evan, but, you know, media coverage, and I'm going to use air quotes here, media bias. As somebody who spent 20 years in a newsroom, I would always chuckle, and chuckle might not have been always the appropriate word, but, you know, you have somebody who pushes back, you know, oh, why did you have to talk to the other side for this story? And like, well, that quite literally is making it fair. Like, if you're getting two sides, and I don't think we're telling any secrets here, that industry has a bit of a reputation of being buttoned up and wanting to fly below the radar because a lot of the negativity out there, you know, they can, Chad mentioned it, you get a black eye from it. So they feel like maybe no news is good news. But as somebody who has lived in a newsroom for a while, you see the other side of it, don't you? Maybe if they open themselves up a little bit, maybe that does create an avenue for some of those more positive stories. Look, it's not going to be a PR release. I'm a PR guy. I'm telling you, we save that for the PR companies. But is that maybe the answer? Maybe opening yourself up a little bit for a little more access could lend to some that story getting told?
And I think it's really understanding that if you don't tell your own story, someone else will. And one of the real challenges the energy industry has run into is it's become aggressively partisanized. You used to have your oil patch Democrats and your all of the above Republicans, not so much anymore. And when I've listened to people who purport to be defenders of the industry talk, they are very aggressive, gung-ho, my side against your side way of thinking. When I get into closed door rooms with people in the industry, there's a whole lot more nuance and understanding and subtlety in how they talk about their work. And so you want to get that across to this lay audience. Now, you can't boil the ocean. You're not going to get your message to every single person out there, but you create more opportunities for that coverage if you can be just a little more transparent about it and offer up your own opportunities. And even just telling your own stories on your own platforms, like this, I think is something that's really beneficial because it teaches the people who work in the industry maybe about things that they don't see every day. So when they talk about their jobs and they understand how they fit into a larger system, they can be those defenders and storytellers to their friends, their family, their communities.
And we're not going to make this a media relations 101, but also want to give you a chance that, you know, this is the Houston Chronicle. This is the fourth largest city in America. If there's a story idea or something that, you know, 95% of the people working in the plant think is a really, really good story, just because the Chronicle doesn't run it, doesn't mean the Chronicle hates industry. You know, I want to give you a chance to sort of give us, I know it's not the company line, but you say it until you're blue in the face. The state of media today, I mean, you guys are doing more with less than you ever have. So maybe the message to those in industry, don't give up on us?
I would say that's a good way to put it. And also understand we have our own challenges too. Everyone's trying to make their system work. You know, I work on the opinion side, so we're in parallel with the newsroom. You know, I don't really know what they do until I show up at that morning content meeting. They're like, oh, these are the stories we have coming later today. And I go, oh, I didn't know. And like, I'll say what we have coming. They go, oh, we didn't know. I was like, good. That's how this is supposed to work.
Be sure to read it.
Yes. Like, please read it. Or like, hey, maybe you guys might want to get, you know, an op-ed on this from someone. Like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, that's how all of this works together. But we keep our opinions out of their news. But something to understand is that when I first started working at the Chronicle, we really were print first. We were thinking, what's going going in physical newspaper that's going to be on people's doorsteps the next morning. Now, everything is digital first. And each piece that we run is almost in competition with every other piece we run. We can see who's clicking on it, how are they getting there, are they getting it from a newsletter, are they getting it from social media, and we can see how long they spend on it. And most importantly, what is the last thing that people are reading before they click to subscribe? Because we're trying to run a publication there, we're trying to run a business. And so sometimes things that are very interesting to a niche core audience just doesn't drive the subscribers, and we have this challenge with arts and arts reviews. We have a lot of important institutions in the city, but it's just not the same financial driver in other ways. And so we're kind of cursed with knowledge about what works and what doesn't in some of this. Now, I still go out of my way to make sure that we are getting smart pieces about institutions important to Houston. Every other week we have an op-ed from Michael Weber, who's an oil and gas expert up at UT, talking about what's going on in the industry. And that's good to have. I want people to know that we care about oil and gas in Houston because that's why we're here.
You mentioned it off the top, but I think this needs to be hammered home. I think Houston as a whole, our region, we don't do a good job of telling our story. No. We're not Dallas. We're certainly not Miami. But I mean, I'll go out of state and people don't know about the culture in our city. They don't know about the food. They know about the rodeo. They know about the Astros scandal. And there's so much more to this region. So I don't think it's necessarily, industry alone. I think it's across the board. And maybe that's one of the reasons that you wanted to come back here is because we are so subdued probably isn't the right word, but we're not flamboyant and we're not, the first person in line to try and tout ourselves. So it's not just industry, but I thought about that because, as you were talking about the, learning from our past, it's like, well, we've also learned how Houston operates and how our people are. And we could all do a better job of sharing our story.
Now, there's a really interesting comparison to, say, the Bay Area, where in California, where you have this big tech hub, and for decades, they knew that they needed positive media coverage to sell all of their wares. They need whiz-bang coverage to sell whatever the latest gizmo is. And so they fostered this relationship with media in ways where you don't need to sell plastic or petroleum or gas. People just buy it in their day-to-day lives. And so we've never really had to sell that. And in fact, it created the sense of if a journalist is showing up, it's probably because something bad happened. And so we have tried to keep our head down, just work. And because we haven't told the story about our most important industry, we also haven't told a story about the rest of our city, and we haven't had that relationship. That started to change a little bit, particularly around the early 2010s when America was still in these post-economic crisis doldrums, but Houston was booming because of fracking. You had this funny situation where the city elected a lesbian mayor, and all these people not from Houston like, oh, wow, how cool, and this and that. I don't know if you ever met Anise Parker. She is not cool. She is not hip.
And she would admit as such.
And she would admit as such. She absolutely would admit as such. But she knew she was a good enough politician to play it up a little bit, to try to get a little positive spin for the city and say, look how diverse we are. Look at all our restaurants.
Wow, these yard signs in Austin. Weird.
Yeah, like you should move here. This is cool. It's sort of stuff like that. But I think we need to keep doing that for our city and keep playing it up. I'm so happy that we have so many people visiting here for the World Cup, and they are really learning what a wonderful place Houston is. But also Houstonians are learning what a wonderful place Houston is, because folks are seeing it through new eyes and really showing us how great we have it.
And the things that we take for granted, like ice in our cups and air and air conditioning.
And air conditioning. But that this idea of living in a place that is so big, successful, abundant, and diverse, where people are happy to see each other.
It's the friendliness.
Yes, it's unique. Yeah. And you don't know this unless you really start to travel around the world and understand, like most people, they go through their lives with like a scowl on their face. Yeah. And like I had someone ask, like, did people get training to do all this small talk?
It's been a lot of media training leading up to the World Cup. Sure.
I was like, did everyone go through like a class? Was there a Zoom class where all the people who are like at Buc-ee's are also like saying hi? Yeah. Like, no, that's just how people are.
That's how we are. We're a little sweaty, but we're also really happy to be here. Just a couple more for you. I love the fact that you are the opinion and the community engagement editor, because you have such a solid finger on the pulse of our city. I joked about it earlier, but I don't want to ever get stuck in your inbox. I cannot imagine the emails that you get, how far to both sides they are. But you also have access to a lot of opinions and a lot of things that people care about. So without giving away business secrets, the folks who are watching this, who are probably involved in industry, who work with a whole lot of Houstonians and families at different levels, like what are some of the things, some of the topics that you can tell our region cares about?
People care about their commutes. That is a huge thing. They care about traffic. They care about construction because it is an experience that everyone in the city has and it impacts your day-to-day life. So that's a critical thing. People are fascinated by what's going on in the medical center. They know it's important, but they're not quite sure exactly. Kind of like the oil and gas industry. Like it's very similar. Yeah. So just trying to find ways to tell those stories. You know, just this morning, the Chronicle ran a piece on medical mysteries, people showing up almost like an episode of House to a hospital in Texas Medical Center, and doctors aren't quite sure what's going on, and then they solve it there. Telling those stories, I think, are really interesting. And there's also a bigger tale to be told about Houston learning about itself. We are the city that's gone through these kind of waves of leadership. It used to be a city where you really had a lot of big swing CEOs at the tops of towers who could say, this is my company and it's going to be this way. Well, now you have a whole lot more shareholder input. You have a whole lot more internationally owned companies or nationally owned companies. So maybe you have a senior VP in Houston, but not a CEO. So that sense of folks with a lot of power and a lot of long-term vision for Houston who drove our city aren't there in the same ways. And so the question is, who's going to fill that gap? I think it's a lot of the philanthropic sector that they left behind. I think you have your Houston endowments. You have a lot of folks at the Greater Houston Partnership who are thinking about these things, but there's also an opportunity for industry to say, you know, like this, we used to really have a seat at the table. For a lot of reasons, it's not there anymore. Maybe we need to get back. And even if it's not in a, corporate way, it can be in an individual way.
Yeah. And they have the clout to do it. That's a really good point. Before give you an opportunity to let folks know how they can reach you, I want to give you the last word. I mean, we brought you in to talk about how you told such a good story about industry, how industry could tell its story better. Anything that I'm leaving out? Any other key message, or should people just go back and watch that video until it's at 55,000?
Well, I'd encourage people just to subscribe to the Houston Chronicle, and I'd say, in the year 2026, if you are not paying for news, you're not getting good news. You need to. You get what you pay for. And I would encourage folks to recognize that there's a lot of fun things on social media, but you are often the product being sold. And when you are paying for the Houston Chronicle, we are responding to you and we are acting to you. And we want to be able to publish the news and report on things around the city that Houstonians care about.
So for the folks who might not be a subscriber, what are the best ways to reach you? We know that you're very busy with a lot of things, but you also make the time for social media because that's part of the job description too. So how can folks get a hold of you and reach you?
You can always email me at evan.mintz@houstonchronicle.com. You can follow me on Twitter at evan7257. I've had that account since like college, so don't go too far back. And also I have an Instagram account where you see my videos at Mintzberg_gardens. Again, that started as me just taking pictures of my garden. I like to garden. And it turned into my professional account. So you get to see some like good pictures of me holding watermelons there. But also right now, the Chronicle, it's 99 cents for 6 months. So that will take you through election season. That'll take you through the end of the year. And we're going to have some really great coverage, not just the interesting races at the top of the ticket, but those down ballot, those judicial races where, the R's and D's don't really matter as much as, is this person actually good at the job? And we are one of the few groups out there who's really trying to dig into that and get people an answer.
We appreciate you taking some time to be here. We appreciate you sharing the story of industry and pounding that drum. And we're going to have to bring you back to talk a little about the Coastal Texas project next time.
Very excited.
We
build the Ike
Dike. We know. The Build the Ike Dike. That's another one of your favorite catchphrases. Evan Mintz of the Houston Chronicle, thank you so much for joining the Gulf Coast Growth Show.
Well, thank you for having me.